Welcome to Dippu Stories. Have you ever had one of those days? A day so long and exhausting that all you want is the peace of your own home? Special Agent Marcus Thorne was having one of those days. After weeks of grueling work, all he wanted was to see his elderly mother. But to get to her, he first had to get past the self-appointed queen of his new neighborhood, a woman who had already decided he didn't belong. In this story, you will witness a tense standoff where assumptions clash with a shocking reality. I will show you how a lifetime of discipline and a small leather wallet can completely upend the balance of power in a single, silent moment. You won't want to miss the look on her face when she realizes who she just tried to kick out. The first envelope. The house sat on a street shaded by old oak trees. A small sign was posted near the entrance, its paint slightly peeled, announcing the name Chestnut Ridge Residential Community. And below it, in smaller, sharper letters, managed by the Homeowners Association, the day Marcus Thorne brought his mother, Eleanor, to her new home. The air was still. Unpacking boxes felt like a quiet ritual. A careful placement of a life's memories into new, empty rooms. In the wooden mailbox, there was already an envelope. White. Impersonal. Inside, there was no welcome letter. No neighborly greeting. There was only a single sheet of paper. On it, a number. A fee for new resident processing. Below that, a list. Rules. Regulations on lawn height. On trash can placement. On the exact shade of white permitted for window trim. It ended not with a signature, but with a cold statement about compliance. And from that moment on, Marcus felt it. A quiet watchfulness. A presence that lived in the perfectly manicured lawns and the uniform mailboxes. The Homeowners Association. Weeks passed. The house began to feel like a home. Eleanor, a retired literature professor with sharp eyes and a gentle spirit, found solace in her small garden. Marcus fell into a routine. The long commute to the federal building downtown. The drive back in the evening. Each time he passed through the ornate iron gates of Chestnut Ridge, he felt the same thing. A subtle pressure, the feeling of being observed. The houses were beautiful. Identical. The silence was deep. Too deep. It was the silence of held breath. Tonight, the drive felt heavier. Rain slicked the asphalt, blurring the streetlights into long, hazy streaks. He thought of his father. His voice, a low rumble from years past, echoed in his mind. Home is not a place. Son, home is the people you keep safe. And Eleanor was why he was here. Her health was fragile, a delicate piece of china that he had to protect. This house, this quiet street, it was meant to be a sanctuary. A final, peaceful chapter. He reached the gate. He pressed the button on the remote clipped to his visor. Nothing. He pressed it again. Harder. The small red light on the device did not blink. The gate remained stubbornly, silently closed. A sigh escaped his lips. A puff of white in the cold air. He reached for his phone to call his mother. Perhaps she could buzz him in from the house panel. It was just a small inconvenience. A dead battery. A faulty wire. Nothing more. But then, a figure emerged from the misty darkness. A woman, walking a small, white dog that seemed to float at the end of its leash. She moved with a purpose that felt official. Her name was Carol Peterson. In Chestnut Ridge, she was more than a resident. She was the neighborhood watch, the rules committee, the final word. Her approach was direct. Her question was simple. May I help you? But the words carried a different weight. They were not an offer of help. They were a challenge. A demand for justification. Marcus kept his voice even, calm. He explained the situation. The faulty remote. The new residency. His mother's name. Eleanor Thorne. At number 24, Oakwood Lane. Carol's smile did not reach her eyes. It was a thin, tight line. She spoke of rules, of verification, of security. Her head tilted. A gesture of feigned curiosity that felt more like an interrogation. She mentioned the Thorne residence, She had heard Mrs. Thorne's son was moving in, but her gaze swept over Marcus. Over his dark skin, his weary face, his simple sedan, and her expression hardened. The conversation was short. Marcus's answers were patient. Carol's questions grew sharper, more pointed, until finally, she delivered the verdict. "I am the head of the security committee," she said, her voice crisp. The little dog at her feet seemed to puff out its chest. "And I do not recognize you. I am calling community patrol." She raised her phone. The screen cast a pale, blue light on her face, making her look like a grim statue. This was it. The line had been crossed. It was no longer a misunderstanding. It was an accusation, an escalation, a show of power. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not argue. He simply let out one final, tired sigh, a breath that carried the weight of 1,000 similar moments on 1,000 other streets. He turned off the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into the inner pocket of his coat. The wallet was old leather, worn at the edges from years of use. He did not flip it open with a flourish. He simply opened it, as one might open a book. Inside was not a driver's license, not a credit card. Inside, nestled against the dark leather, was a shield of gold, an eagle with its wings spread wide, its gaze fierce and unwavering, and below it, the words, sharp, clean, undeniable. Federal Bureau of Investigation. He did not say a word. He did not have to. He simply held it there, letting the dim light from the gatepost catch the polished metal. Carol Peterson froze. Her phone, still held halfway to her ear, seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The smug confidence on her face dissolved. It evaporated into the cold, rainy night, replaced by a stark, pale mask of disbelief. And then, fear. The gate beside them buzzed. A harsh, electric sound. Eleanor had opened it from the house. It began to slide open. A slow, heavy curtain revealing the path home. Marcus closed his wallet, the soft click of leather on leather echoing in the silence. He started the car, and as he drove through the opening, he left Carol Peterson standing alone in the rain, a statue of frozen authority, under the watchful, unblinking eye of the Homeowners Association. The Queen of Chestnut Ridge. Before the wallet, before the badge, there was only the rain and the car. Carol Peterson saw the gray sedan sitting idle by the main gate, a dark, unfamiliar shape against the wet asphalt. It was a violation of the evening's predictable rhythm. She narrowed her eyes, a familiar tightness forming in her chest. Her evening walk with Prince, her little white poodle whose paws made almost no sound on the pavement, was a ritual. It was not for exercise. It was a patrol. Her territory, every out-of-place trash can, every lawn cut a fraction of an inch too short, every unfamiliar vehicle, she noticed it all. This car was an anomaly, an error in the otherwise perfect, silent equation of Chestnut Ridge. Her husband, Arthur, had been gone for 5 years now. He had been a quiet, logical man, an engineer who saw the world in terms of stress points and structural integrity. He would have called her vigilance an unnecessary expenditure of energy, but the silence in their large, immaculate house was vast, a cavernous space she had tried to fill with purpose. The Homeowners Association gave her that purpose. After Arthur's passing, the bylaws became her scripture. The monthly meetings became her congregation. Rules were her companions. Order was her comfort. She was not just a resident living out her widowhood, she was a guardian, a protector of the quiet, manicured peace that everyone paid so dearly to maintain. As she drew closer to the gate, a motion-activated porch light flickered on down the street. It was Brenda Walsh, her neighbor and chief lieutenant on the social committee. Brenda, wrapped in a pink bathrobe, waved a frantic little gesture from her doorway. Carol, did you see that Brenda's voice was a stage whisper that carried easily across the damp, still air? That car has been sitting there for 10 minutes. The engine is running. Doesn't look like any delivery service, I know. Carol gave a slow, deliberate nod. Her expression grim. This was validation. I'm heading over now. Brenda. Someone has to... They spoke for a moment longer, their voices low, weaving a familiar tapestry from threads of suspicion. They talked of the Amazon van that barreled down Willow Lane, of the new roofing crew on Maple Drive that left nails on the street, of the constant, low-grade fear of the outside world, with its chaos and its unpredictability, creeping in. For Carol, these were not small complaints. They were cracks in the wall, breaches in the fortress she had helped to build and was sworn to defend. She remembered an incident from 2 years ago. A teenager from the next town over, a place with smaller houses and less manicured lawns, had hopped the back fence. He had stolen a child's bright red Schwinn bicycle from a garage left carelessly open. It was a minor thing. The bike recovered the next day. But for Carol, it became a defining moment, a piece of irrefutable evidence. Proof that vigilance was not paranoia, it was a fundamental necessity. The world outside Chestnut Ridge was a rising tide of disorder. And she was the seawall. After her brief conference with Brenda, her suspicion hardened into cold resolve. This was not just a car with a dead remote. It was a test, a challenge to the very fabric of order she had sworn to uphold. She gave Brenda a final, firm nod, a general acknowledging her field officer. I will handle this, she said, her voice filled with the weight of her self-appointed duty. It is my responsibility. She felt a surge of adrenaline, the familiar, quiet thrill of having a problem to solve, a wrong to right, a potential threat to neutralize. She straightened her posture, pulling Prince's leash a little tighter, the leather creaking softly in her hand. The poodle, sensing her shift in demeanor, trotted proudly beside her. A small, white soldier at her command, she walked toward the gray sedan, each step firm, measured on the wet pavement. She rehearsed the opening line in her head, a question she had perfected over countless encounters at community meetings and through sharply worded emails. It was polite, yet firm, inquisitive, yet authoritative, a key designed to unlock any situation and reveal its true nature. She stopped beside the driver's window, her shadow falling over the man inside. A silent, imposing presence. She cleared her throat, ready to begin the interrogation. May I help you? An unspoken question. The light tap on his window was a physical intrusion into the quiet sanctuary of his car. Marcus had been lost in a thought, a memory of his father teaching him how to change a tire on a rainy afternoon, much like this one. He looked up, and the memory dissolved. Harold Peterson's face, illuminated by the cold, sterile light of the gate's keypad, was a mask of polite inquiry. It was a mask he had seen countless times before, in countless other places. He pressed the button, and the window slid down a few inches with a soft hum, letting in the smell of wet earth and the sound of the light rain. May I help you? She asked again, her voice as crisp and controlled as the trimmed hedges that lined the street. Marcus felt the familiar weariness settle over him, a heavy cloak he could never seem to shrug off. He kept his own voice even, betraying nothing. Good evening, he replied, his tone neutral. My gate remote seems to be dead. I was just about to call my mother to let me in. He kept it simple, factual. He watched her process the information. He could see the gears turning behind her eyes, the quick mental calculations. She was not listening to his words. She was scanning for holes in his story, for weaknesses. Your mother, she inquired, her head tilting in a gesture that was meant to look thoughtful but felt like a cross-examination. And who might that be, Eleanor Thorne? He said, his patience a finite resource he was carefully rationing. Number 24, Oakwood Lane. A thin, bloodless smile touched Carol's lips. It was a smile of discovery, of confirmation. Ah, yes. The Thorne residence, a lovely home. I had heard Mrs. Thorne's son was moving back to help her out. She paused, letting the silence stretch. But the word hung in the air between them, heavy and sharp. Her gaze drifted over him. A quick, dismissive inventory that took in his simple car. The tired lines around his eyes, the dark color of his skin, the butt became a wall. Invisible but solid, Marcus said nothing. He had learned long ago that arguing with a wall only left you with bruised knuckles. He simply waited, his hands resting on the steering wheel. "I am the head of the security committee here," Carol announced then. As if presenting a credential, her voice gained an edge of steel. It was the voice she used at HOA meetings when a rule had been broken. "I make it my business to know all the residents in Chestnut Ridge. And you, Sir, are not Mrs. Thorne's son." It was a lie. A breathtaking, deliberate falsehood constructed from a foundation of pure prejudice. Marcus felt a small, hot spark of anger ignite deep in his chest. A pilot light that was always burning, but years of training, years of discipline, formed a fortress around it. He kept his expression unreadable, his gaze steady. His unnatural calmness seemed to agitate her further. It was not the reaction she expected. In her world, an innocent person would be flustered, indignant, perhaps even a little loud. His quiet composure was, to her, a sign of guilt, of deceit. It was an affront to her authority, and she could not let it stand. "We have rules against loitering at the main gate," she continued, her voice rising almost imperceptibly. "It is a security risk. You understand." "I am not loitering," Marcus said, his voice still low and steady, a stark contrast to her growing agitation. "I am waiting to enter my own home." That was the final straw for Carol. The quiet defiance in his tone was more than she could bear. She took a half step back, her face setting into a mask of righteous determination, the look of a martyr doing a difficult but necessary job. She raised her phone, the screen casting a pale, blue light on her face. "I am calling Community Patrol," she declared, her voice ringing with the finality of a gavel strike. "We do not tolerate trespassers here." Trespassers. The word hung in the small, enclosed space of the car. A federal agent, a son on his way to his mother's side, was now a trespasser, an intruder, an enemy at the gate of his own sanctuary. The threat was made. The accusation was public. The little drama Carol had constructed had reached its climax. And she stood there, phone in hand, waiting for him to break. Carol has made her final move, accusing a man of being a trespasser at his own home. She expects him to argue, to plead, to get angry. She is not prepared for what he does next. The entire story turns in the next 60 seconds. To show you're ready for the moment of truth, just type the word badge in the comments. You are not going to want to miss the look on her face. The weight of authority. At Carol's final, damning declaration, Marcus let out a slow, quiet sigh. It was not a sound of defeat or frustration. It was a sound of profound, bone-deep exhaustion. It was the sound of a man who had played this game too many times and was now officially forfeiting his turn. He looked at her, at the phone held like a weapon, at the unwavering, self-assured glint in her eyes. He said one thing, his voice not loud, but carrying an unmistakable and absolute finality. "Mrs. Peterson, that is enough." He then reached forward and turned the key in the ignition. The car's engine died with a soft whir, and the sudden silence that fell was heavy, thick, broken only by the soft, rhythmic drumming of rain on the roof. Slowly, with a deliberate lack of haste that seemed to stretch time itself, he reached into the inner pocket of his coat. Carol watched his every move, her expression a triumphant, nervous mixture of suspicion and validation. She expected an ID card, a driver's license she could scrutinize under the pale light, searching for a flaw, a forgery. The wallet he produced was made of old, dark leather. It was not fancy. It was worn at the edges, the kind of wear that comes from years of constant, reliable service. He did not flip it open with a flourish or a snap of his wrist. He simply opened it, as one might open a treasured, well-read book, and held it up in the dim light. He did not need to angle it. Even in the gloom of the rainy evening, the object nestled inside against the dark leather seemed to possess its own luminescence. The shield was a warm, heavy gold. The eagle was exquisitely detailed. Its wings spread wide in a posture of silent, sovereign power, its talons seeming to grip an unseen olive branch and a bundle of arrows. And below it, the words, engraved with a cold, hard, irrefutable clarity. Federal Bureau of Investigation. He said nothing. He let the shield and the words speak for him. He let the weight of their meaning fill the space between them. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. A vacuum where Carol's authority had once been. Her world tilted, then shattered. Her brain, so quick to categorize and condemn, struggled to process the image. The confident smirk on her face faltered, wavered, then crumbled completely. Like a sandcastle hit by a wave, it was replaced by a rapid, cascading sequence of emotions first. Sheer, slack-jawed incomprehension. Then, a flicker of dawning realization. And finally, a surge of cold, stark, nauseating fear. The hand holding her phone trembled, the device suddenly feeling as heavy as a brick. Just then, as if summoned by the drama, a white SUV with Chestnut Ridge security stenciled on the side pulled up behind them. A young man in a crisp, slightly too large uniform, David, stepped out. He was new, full of the eagerness that comes with a first taste of authority, and he approached Marcus's car with an air of practiced, stern importance. "Is there a problem here?" David asked, his voice a little too loud. Trying to project command, he peered into the car, his gaze sweeping over Marcus with professional suspicion. Marcus did not turn his head. He simply tilted the open wallet slightly in David's direction. The young guard's eyes, full of challenge a moment before, widened. The color drained from his face as if a plug had been pulled. His practiced authority evaporated into the misty air. "Sir, my apologies." "Sir," David stammered, his body language shifting instantly from confrontational to deferential. His back straightened, his hands clasped nervously. Is everything all right here?" Sir Marcus finally lowered the wallet, closing it with a soft, final click. The weight of it seemed to settle the air around them. He looked past the humbled guard, his gaze landing on Carol, who stood frozen, a statue of miscalculation caught in a flash of lightning. "There is no problem," Marcus said, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the rain. "Mrs. Peterson was just doing her due diligence, ensuring the neighborhood is safe." He paused, letting the subtle irony of the words sink in. "You can let your colleagues know that the new owner at number 24 has arrived." He emphasized the word owner, giving it a quiet, definitive weight. A harsh, metallic buzz cut through the tension. The gate, triggered by Eleanor from the comfort of the house, began to slide open. It moved with a slow, mechanical groan, a heavy curtain rising after a play had reached its dramatic, unexpected conclusion. Marcus started his car, and without a backward glance, he drove through the opening, leaving Carol Peterson and a thoroughly chastened David standing together in the awkward, rain-soaked silence. The last 100 yards. The iron gate slid shut behind him, the soft click of the lock echoing the closing of a chapter. The last 100 yards of Oakwood Lane stretched before him. Quiet, tree-lined tunnel leading home. But the short drive felt different now, longer. He passed the identical houses, their windows glowing with warm, inviting light. He saw the perfectly manicured lawns, the uniform mailboxes standing like silent sentinels. A place designed for peace, for safety. He thought of the word safety. What did it really mean? For Carol Peterson, safety was a wall, a gate, a set of rules designed to keep the unfamiliar, the unpredictable, at bay. She saw herself as the guardian of that safety, a lone watchman on the wall. But tonight, her fortress had become a prison. Her vigilance had become a threat. She had built her walls so high that she could no longer see the humanity of the person standing on the other side. He wondered, with a pang of sadness, What these people were so afraid of. Were these gates and rules meant to keep intruders out? Or were they meant to lock their own fears in them? He saw it. At the end of the cul-de-sac, his house, a soft light spilled from the living room window. A beacon in the rainy dark. He could just make out a silhouette in the armchair by the window. His mother, Eleanor. That single image cut through the weariness. The frustration, the quiet anger that had been simmering within him. That was his safety. That was his sanctuary, not the house, not the street, but the person waiting inside. His father's words echoed in his mind once more. Home is the people you keep safe. He pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. The silence returning. For a moment, he just sat there, letting the tension of the encounter at the gate slowly drain away. The armor of Special Agent Thorne dissolved, piece by piece, leaving only Marcus, the son. He took a deep breath, straightened his tie, and stepped out into the rain. The front door opened before he could find his keys. Eleanor stood there, a soft woolen shawl draped over her shoulders. She was smaller than he remembered her being as a child, more fragile, but her eyes were as sharp and intelligent as ever. They held a wisdom that saw far more than she ever spoke of. She did not ask why he was late. She did not ask about the flashing lights she might have seen from the security patrol car. "I made that ginger tea you like," she said, her voice a gentle comfort. "I thought it might be a good night for it." She stepped aside to let him in. The warmth of the house enveloped him, a stark contrast to the cold hostility he had just faced. He took off his wet coat and hung it by the door. On the small table in the entryway, a steaming mug of tea was waiting for him. He followed her into the living room. She settled back into her armchair, a book resting in her lap. He sat on the ottoman across from her, cradling the warm mug in his hands. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of unspoken understanding, a lifetime of shared history. She looked at him over the rim of her reading glasses, her gaze steady and knowing. "A long day, dear?" she asked. It was a simple question, but it held a universe of meaning. It was not a question about his caseload, about reports or investigations. It was a question about the weight he carried on his shoulders, a weight she had seen him carry for years. A genuine smile, the first one of his entire evening, touched Marcus's lips. The warmth from the mug seeped into his hands, chasing away the last of the chill. He took a sip of the tea, the spicy sweet flavor, a taste of home, of comfort, of unconditional love. "It was," he admitted. "But it's better now. I'm home." He sat there for a long while, sipping his tea and listening to the quiet turning of pages and the soft drumming of rain against the window pane. He glanced out the window, toward the distant, closed gate. He knew the incident was not truly over. There would be echoes, ripples, and he would have to decide how, or if, he would face them. Part 6: Echoes in a Quiet House. The gray sedan disappeared into the manicured darkness of Chestnut Ridge, its taillights shrinking to 2 small red dots before vanishing completely. Carol Peterson stood alone in the rain, the world around her suddenly muted and out of focus. The young security guard, David, shifted his weight from one foot to the other, the picture of awkward uncertainty as the picture of given round. "Ma'am, Mrs. Peterson, is there anything you need?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Carol did not answer. She could not. Her throat felt tight, her mind a frantic scramble of disbelief and humiliation. She gave a small, jerky shake of her head and turned, walking away from the gate, away from David's pitying eyes. Prince, her poodle, seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere. He trotted close to her heels, his usual proud prance replaced by a hesitant, nervous gait. The short walk back to her own front door felt like a mile-long journey of shame. She let herself into the house. The silence that greeted her was different tonight. Usually, it was a peaceful, orderly silence, a testament to a life well managed. Tonight, it was a heavy, accusing silence. It amplified the frantic thumping of her own heart. The house, with its perfectly placed furniture and dust-free surfaces, felt like a museum display of a life that was no longer hers. Prince, instead of running to his water bowl, simply lay down on the rug by the door with a soft whine, tucking his head between his paws. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket, the vibration startling her. She pulled it out. The screen read Brenda Walsh. Of course. Carol's first instinct was to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail, but that would only invite more questions, more gossip. With a trembling finger, she answered. Carol. My goodness, I saw the security car pull up. What on earth happened? Brenda's voice was a high-pitched mixture of excitement and concern, a combination Carol now found deeply irritating. Who was that man? He looked rather intimidating. It was nothing. Brenda, Carol said, her own voice sounding strange and distant to her ears. She tried to inject her usual tone of authority into it, but it came out flat. Just a misunderstanding. The new residence remote wasn't working. A misunderstanding. But you were talking to him for so long and the guard looked so flustered. Everything is under control, Carol insisted, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. I have to go. She ended the call before Brenda could pry any further. She tossed the phone onto the entryway table as if it were contaminated. A misunderstanding. The phrase felt hollow. A pathetic attempt to wallpaper over a gaping hole in her reality. She walked into the living room and sank into a stiff, upright armchair, the one Arthur had never liked. Her gaze fell upon the framed photograph on the mantelpiece. Arthur, with his kind, tired eyes and his gentle, unassuming smile, she stared at his face, searching for, what, approval, absolution. All she could feel was a crushing wave of shame. What would he have thought of her actions tonight, Arthur? The engineer, the man of quiet logic and gentle reason. A memory surfaced. Unbidden, it was from years ago, during one of the first heated HOA meetings about installing the new security gates. He had turned to her on the car ride home, a thoughtful look on his face. Be careful with walls, honey, he had said softly. You build them too high, and you end up trapping yourself inside. At the time, she had dismissed it as weakness, a lack of appreciation for the dangers of the world. Now, for the very first time, she understood what he meant. She was trapped inside the fortress of rules and regulations she had built around herself, a prisoner of her own fear. The phone buzzed again, a sharp, insistent sound from the other room. With a sense of dread, she rose and walked back to the table. This time, the screen displayed a different name. Mr. Henderson, HOA president. Her heart seized. The quiet echoes of her mistake were over. The real storm was just beginning. Ripples on a calm surface. The incident at the gate did not simply fade into the rainy night. It began to travel, moving through the official channels of Chestnut Ridge like a quiet, inexorable current. Young David, the security guard, followed protocol. He returned to the small guardhouse at the entrance and filed a digital report. He detailed the time, the location, the initial complaint from Mrs. Peterson, and the subsequent interaction. He described the subject's vehicle, his demeanor, and, in a carefully worded, slightly odd sentence, the presentation of federal credentials. The report was automatically flagged and emailed to his supervisor, and to the official inbox of the Homeowners Association Board of Directors. Robert Henderson, the HOA president, was reading in his study when the notification pinged on his tablet. Henderson was a retired corporate lawyer in his late 60s, a man who approached community governance with the same dispassionate, risk-averse precision he had once applied to multi-million-dollar contracts. He read David's report twice, his expression unchanging. He felt no anger, no moral outrage. He felt only a familiar, cold prickle of concern. This was a liability, a potential lawsuit, a public relations problem waiting to happen. His first call was to Carol Peterson. He did not waste time with pleasantries. Carol, Robert Henderson here, he began, his voice calm and professional. I'm looking at an incident report from the main gate this evening. I need you to walk me through exactly what happened. Carol, who was still reeling from her own internal storm, tried to frame the story in her favor. She spoke of her duty, of security protocols, of the man's suspicious behavior. Henderson listened patiently, interrupting only with short, sharp questions. Did he at any point refuse to identify himself? Carol, well, no. But did you prevent him from entering the community after he identified himself as a resident? I was only trying to verify, and the report states he presented credentials from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Is that accurate? There was a long pause. Yes. Robert, Carol finally whispered. That is accurate. Henderson sighed. A soft, weary sound. All right, Carol, here is what needs to happen, effective immediately. You are to suspend all activities as head of the security committee. No patrols. No reports. No resident interactions. Do you understand? The board will handle this from here. It was not a request. It was an order. For Carol, it was a blow more stunning than the badge itself. Her authority, her very identity within the community, had been stripped away with a single, calm command. Henderson's next task was to find the phone number for a Mr. Marcus Thorne. It was easily located in the new resident files. He rehearsed his opening lines in his head before dialing, crafting the words with the care of a legal document. He needed to be apologetic but not weak, firm but not defensive. He needed to manage the situation. Marcus was in the kitchen, helping his mother put away the last of the dinner dishes, when his personal cell phone rang. It was an unfamiliar local number. He answered with his usual professional greeting. Special Agent Thorne. This is Robert Henderson. I am the president of the Chestnut Ridge Homeowners Association. The voice on the other end was smooth, measured, and deeply serious. Sir, I am calling to offer my sincerest apologies on behalf of the entire board for the unfortunate incident you experienced at our main gate this evening. Your treatment was unacceptable, and I assure you we are taking the matter very seriously. Marcus listened, his expression neutral. It was the kind of carefully worded, corporate apology designed to diffuse a problem before it could escalate. I'm sure you can understand. Henderson continued, that we would like to address this in a more formal manner. I would be grateful for the opportunity to meet with you at your convenience, either at your home or in the community office. We want to ensure that you feel welcome and, above all, safe in your new home. The offer hung in the air. Marcus looked at his mother, who was watching him with quiet concern. He could easily accept the apology, say a few polite words, and end the call. He could let the ripples fade, or he could agree to the meeting. He could step into the current and see where it led. He had a choice to make. Marcus now faces a critical choice. Accept the corporate apology and let it go, or agree to the meeting and confront the issue head on. The story hinges on this decision. To show you're with us on this journey to the end, just type the word meet in the comments below. His choice, and the powerful, tense conversation that follows, is coming right up. The conversation. The community office was a small, sterile room that smelled faintly of industrial cleaning supplies and old paper from forgotten binders. A long, polished mahogany table reflected the cool, humming fluorescent lights from the ceiling, making the surface look like a dark, still body of water. Robert Henderson sat at the head of the table, a slim leather portfolio placed perfectly parallel to the edge in front of him, a testament to his orderly mind. To his right sat Carol Peterson. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. Her posture was unnaturally rigid, a statue of pure tension. She had not looked directly at Marcus since he had quietly entered the room and taken his seat. Marcus sat opposite her, the vast, polished expanse of the table separating them. The silence in the room was not peaceful. It was heavy, formal, the kind of silence that precedes a legal deposition. Henderson cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the confined space, a signal that the proceedings were about to begin. Special Agent Thorne, he began, his voice the smooth, practiced, and dispassionate tone of a lawyer addressing a jury. Once again, on behalf of the entire board of the Chestnut Ridge Homeowners Association, I want to formally and unreservedly apologize for the incident that occurred. It was an unacceptable failure of our established protocols and a violation of the standards of respect we strive to uphold in this community." He paused, his eyes flicking down to a note in his portfolio. "I can assure you that we are thoroughly reviewing our security procedures. We will be implementing mandatory sensitivity and de-escalation training for all volunteer committee members. Furthermore, as a direct result of this event, Mrs. Peterson has been suspended indefinitely from her duties as head of the security committee. It was a textbook de-escalation, a corporate strategy designed to acknowledge fault, outline corrective action, and contain a problem. Henderson was offering solutions, procedures, consequences. He was building a neat, legal fence around the messy, emotional core of the issue. He was trying to close the file. Marcus listened patiently, his hands resting calmly on the table. When Henderson was finished, he gave a slight, acknowledging nod. But his posture made it clear he did not accept these words as a conclusion. "Mr. Henderson," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying a firmness that cut through the sterile air of the room. "I appreciate the procedural assurances, truly. But I am not here this evening to discuss bylaws or training modules." He slowly turned his gaze from Henderson and settled it, for the very first time, directly on Carol. Her eyes flinched as if from a bright light. But this time, she held his gaze. "I am here to understand. Mrs. Peterson, Carol, I have a question for you, if you are willing to answer it. When you looked at me sitting in my car that night, what precisely were you trying to protect?" The question was unexpected. It was not an accusation. It was an invitation to introspection. Henderson shifted uncomfortably in his high-backed chair, his carefully prepared script now rendered useless. The question did not fit into any of his procedural boxes. Carol was silent for a long moment, her throat working. Her entire identity in this community was built on the answer to that question. "Safety," she finally whispered, the word barely audible, a fragile shield against his inquiry. "The safety of our community, our homes, our families. My mother's safety is the only reason I am here," Marcus responded, his voice softening, becoming more personal. He leaned forward slightly, the movement drawing the focus of the room entirely onto him. "My mother, Eleanor, is not well. Over the past few years, her world has become very small and very quiet. This house, this neighborhood, it is supposed to be her sanctuary, a place where she can sit in her garden, read her books, and feel absolutely, unequivocally secure, without fear." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the silent room. "That night, when you stopped me at the gate, you were not just stopping a stranger in a car. You were standing between me and my most fundamental responsibility on this earth. You became a barrier between a son and his aging mother. The safety you were trying to create, a safety born from a fear of the outside world, became a direct threat to the safety and the peace of my family. Right here, inside these very walls, you claim to protect." He did not raise his voice. He did not use the language of prejudice or race. He spoke only of a mother and a son, of sanctuary, of responsibility. He had taken the incident out of the cold, impersonal language of rules and liability and placed it squarely into the warm, fragile, and universal context of human connection. Something inside Carol Peterson broke. It was not her composure, that was already gone. It was something deeper. The rigid, self-righteous wall she had built around her heart for 5 long years finally cracked, then crumbled. A single tear escaped and traced a slow, hot path down her cheek. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw, trembling, stripped of all its former authority. I was wrong," she said, her voice catching. She looked directly at Marcus, her eyes filled with a shame that was profound, painful, and deeply genuine. I let it make me see things that were not there. I was protecting an idea, not people. I am so sorry. Not because you are a federal agent. I am sorry because I did not see a son, on his way home to his mother. For that specific failure, I am truly, deeply sorry. The apology landed in the silent room with an incredible, cleansing weight. It was not coerced. It was not a legal maneuver. It was a confession, a moment of pure, painful, human honesty. Marcus held her gaze for a beat longer, seeing the broken pride and the nascent understanding within it. He then gave a slow, deliberate nod. Thank you. Carol, he said softly. That apology means a great deal. Robert Henderson sat back in his chair, his leather portfolio completely forgotten. He looked from Marcus to Carol, a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps surprise, perhaps respect in his lawyerly eyes. He had come here to manage a problem, but he had just witnessed something else entirely. Something unexpected. Something he could not file away. Something human. The silence that filled the room now was not awkward or heavy. It was the quiet, thoughtful silence of a shared and difficult understanding. A different kind of dawn. Several weeks passed. The autumn leaves of Chestnut Ridge turned from brilliant gold to a deep, burnished red, carpeting the perfect, HOA-approved lawns in a layer of transient, messy beauty. An email, concise and professional, was sent to all residents from the desk of Robert Henderson. It stated that for personal reasons, Mrs. Carol Peterson would be stepping down from all her duties with the Homeowners Association. Effective immediately, the board, the email concluded, thanked her for her many years of dedicated service. There was no other explanation offered. There was no gossip, at least not openly. The quiet, orderly life of the community continued on its predictable course, seemingly unchanged by the quiet drama that had unfolded at its gates. But some things had changed, the most important things. On a bright, cool Saturday morning, Marcus was in the front yard with his mother. The air was crisp with the promise of winter, but the sun was warm. Eleanor, wearing her favorite pair of worn gardening gloves, was carefully tending to her collection of rose bushes. Her face, framed by wisps of silver hair, was serene as she snipped away a withered leaf here, a spent bloom there. Marcus was kneeling beside her on a foam pad, holding the small pail for the trimmings. He was listening as she explained, with the patient enthusiasm of a lifelong teacher, the subtle difference in fragrance between a floribunda and a grandiflora. He found a simple, profound peace in these moments. Yet, one is vague, grounding joy that was the entire reason he had uprooted his life and moved here. He heard the soft scuff of walking shoes on the sidewalk and looked up. It was Carol Peterson. She was out for a walk, this time without her little white poodle, Prince. She wore a simple gray sweater and slacks, not her usual authoritative blazer and perfectly pressed trousers. When she saw them, she hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Her body tensed, a fleeting, instinctual preparation to turn and walk the other way, to avoid the encounter. Marcus met her eyes across the lawn. He did not smile, but he did not look away either. He simply offered a quiet, neutral acknowledgement, a silent signal that the space between them was safe. To his surprise, she did not retreat. After that brief hesitation, she took a tentative step toward them, stopping at the edge of the lawn, her hands tucked into her pockets. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was softer than he had ever heard it, stripped of its hard, officious edge. "Good morning, Carol," Marcus replied evenly, his voice carrying easily in the still morning air. Eleanor, entirely oblivious to the history that hung between these two people, looked up from a particularly stubborn thorn and gave a warm, genuine smile. "Hello there, what a beautiful day to be outside." Carol's gaze fell to the rose bushes, and a flicker of something like relief crossed her face. She was on solid, neutral ground now. "Your roses are just stunning, Eleanor," she said, her voice gaining a little confidence as she spoke of something she understood. "That deep red color is magnificent. Is that a Mr. Lincoln variety?" "Why, yes, it is." Eleanor beamed, clearly delighted to be talking about her passion. He's a bit of a drama queen, always wants to be the center of attention, but he does put on a wonderful show. Doesn't he? They spoke for another minute, maybe two. It was a simple, unremarkable conversation between neighbors about the challenges of black spot, the best time to prune for winter, and the unpredictability of the first frost. Then, it was over. Carol did not linger. She offered a small, polite smile that, for the first time, seemed to reach her eyes. She said her goodbyes and continued on her way down the street. Her pace unhurried. It was nothing. A brief chat about gardening, set in. And yet, it was everything. Later that morning, Marcus and Eleanor sat on the front porch swing, which moved with a gentle, rhythmic creak. They were sipping hot tea from matching ceramic mugs. A comfortable silence between them. The air was crisp, and the sun felt warm on their faces. That neighbor seems different, Eleanor remarked thoughtfully, her gaze following Carol's distant figure as she turned the corner at the end of the street. She used to walk by here like a general inspecting her troops. You know, her back was always so straight. Today, she just seemed like a woman out for a walk. Marcus smiled into his mug, the warmth spreading through his hands. He thought about the gates, the rules, the architecture of fear. He thought about the quiet, difficult conversation in the sterile office. He thought about apologies offered and apologies accepted. I think we are all changing a little bit. Mom, he said softly. He looked out at the quiet street, at the identical houses, and the perfectly manicured world of Chestnut Ridge. He knew the walls, both real and invisible, had not simply disappeared overnight. Prejudice was not a weed you could pull in a single afternoon. It was a deep, tangled root that took time and patience and light to starve of its power. But today, a neighbor had stopped to talk about roses. Today, the silence on the street felt a little less like held breath, and a little more like genuine peace. For now, he thought, as he felt the warmth of the sun and the quiet, steady presence of his mother beside him, that was enough. It was a start. It was a different kind of dawn. In the end, this story reminds us that behind every label we see, the Karen, the black man, the agent, there is always a human story. It was never just about a confrontation at a gate. It was about a son trying to get home to his mother. The most powerful moments are often the quiet ones, where understanding begins to replace judgment. What part of this journey resonated with you the most? I would be genuinely honored to read your thoughts in the comments below. If you appreciate stories that explore these deeper truths, please consider subscribing to HOA Karen Stories. Thank you for sharing this time with me, my friends.